I once heard transformation described as the dance of changing realities. I love that definition, and it makes transformation seem a little more dancey, a little more fun than it can be, because I know if you are going through a transformation, it can be deeply uncomfortable. It can be really unsettling. And at the same time, it can be exciting and empowering. But again, on the other hand, it can be really uncomfortable and uncertain and confusing because you're stepping out into the unknown through this transformation. And I have been through some very transformative times in my life. I'm Natalie. Welcome to the Mystical Movement Show. And in this episode, I'm going to share with you some of my top tips for going through a transformation. This is truly like what I would have told to myself whenever I was going through, specifically one transformation comes to mind, which was going from being a very evangelical Christian, like super culty type Christian, to being a very witchy, dancing, mystery loving gal. And I really went through that transformation, not even necessarily by my own, like, I'm just ready to let this go. No, I was thrust into it whenever I found out that my father had been having affairs for all of these years, and he had given me even a purity ring during that time. So, like, there I am in like purity ring, and I'm doing all of these things to be like the perfect little Christian daughter and stuff. And then just to find out that all of these, like, there were all of these lies and all of this betrayal happening, that really made me go like, okay, what is this belief system that I'm following? Who are these people I'm trying to believe? Why are these the stories that I believe? And that ultimately actually feel really like limiting beliefs whenever I start to look at them. I progressed into that, right? That was a progression. At first it was just heartbreak. And so again, if you're in a transformation, I know how uncomfortable that can be, and I'm going to share with you some of my top tips for going through a transformation. And the first one is to say goodbye to your old self, because that's the whole point of transformation. You're going from one state to another. Like I said, the dance of changing realities. You're going from one way of being into another. So you have to say goodbye to that old self. And there's a quote I heard once that goes, if you, like, physician, if you are trying to heal someone, make sure that he's ready to let go of what's making him sick. And I know for me, like I said, I was kind of thrust into that transformation, but that's what made me realize I was ready to let go of something. And not even ready, but like that I had to, that it was something that I needed to do. And I can say from this side of it too, how incredibly, immensely grateful I am for this transformation into so much more sensuality, so much more pleasure, so much more free will, so much more um sexuality, sensuality, and oneness, and not being, because I was, what I mean by culty type Christian is like I was of that kind that was like, I'm right and you're wrong, or like I, me, and anyone in this belief system is right and you're wrong. And if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell. And it wasn't just like, oh, I can have my beliefs and you can too, and we can all live our lives. More where I'm at now, it was this like, again, like trying to convert other people kind of way of Christianity, which is one of the things that I think really defines a cult, is that you are trying to convert other people, or that you think you're right and that other people are wrong about things that are ultimately mysteries. The Mystical Movement Show. That's what we're here to talk about, the mysteries. And so you can see where I've landed, right? You're on this like more mystery side, but that culty type of like I'm right and you're wrong is very separation consciousness based. And rather than being in oneness and freedom and love and surrender, it's control and separation and fear and hate. And so I'm immensely grateful for having gone through this transformation and transformed my belief, and then ultimately my connection with my body, my connection with my spirit, my connection with nature. All of these things have transformed a lot because of the power of belief systems. And most of these episodes in this show talk about that. So that's what I mean by like letting go of that old self, being willing to die to that old self, is because you're saying goodbye to it. and being willing to step into something new. And that can be really uncomfortable and uncertain. Again, that's where that faith, where I'm just trying to encourage you from this side of let the transformation happen, trust the process, say goodbye because there's something beautiful on the other side. And this podcast is about the intersection of creativity and wellness. And here we see creativity so fully because that's your choice in saying goodbye to the old self. Your choice is who you create on the other side. This transformation isn't just, I didn't just go through this transformation from one thing to the other and not have any creative role in it or not be aware of how it was affecting my well-being and the well-being of others. That was all top of mind as far as how I was going through this transformation. But first came the acceptance that things will never be the same. Like I'm hearing that lyric, things will never be the same. You have to accept that. And in accepting that things will never be the same, you can go, okay, but how much better can they be? Just because they'll never be the same doesn't mean it's going to be worse. And that brings me to the second tip, which is to make a daily habit, a daily routine. Whenever you're going through a transformational phase in your life, it can be really anchoring to have some sort of daily habit, daily routine that you can come back to as all of these other variables are shifting in your life. And this is where the creativity and the wellness comes in because you get to create what that habit is. And then from that habit, what kind of life are you creating? How much well-being are you creating through that habit? So say it's to start having a cup of herbal tea in the morning before any caffeine or anything like that. That kind of habit really supports your well-being, and that's the choice of it, the creativity of it is within that. I'm actually staying right now with some family, not my immediate family, but people who are like family to me, and I've stayed here during different transformational periods in my life, and it is difficult whenever you're hopping around, going from place to place, or whenever you have all of these unknowns in your life to feel that sense of grounding and that sense of anchoring. But if you have a habit, something that you can do in any circumstance, something that you can do, again, in the morning, like I mentioned with the tea thing, or something before bed, or something throughout the middle of your day, whatever it is, some kind of daily habit will anchor you as you're going through this season of your life. And it's not only anchoring you, it's also, again, turn who you're going to create yourself to be, who you're transforming into, that new state that you're moving into, the reality you're moving into with this dance of changing realities. You get to be an active participant in that with the intentionality of how you spend your time. And just even one daily routine can be a great way to get intentional about that. And that intentionality is going to come through in several of these other tips. The third tip is to create an altar. And this doesn't have to be maybe what would come to your mind necessarily whenever you think of an altar, but create that sacred space for yourself, some kind of sacred space for yourself, whether it's the shower. And this kind of goes back to that daily routine too, you can even make that act a sacred act, something that feels sacred to you, but creating that altar, whatever it is, whether it could even be your pillow, like your bed could be your altar. If you come to it again with that intentionality, the intentionality is so key. And I really believe intention is one of our most magical abilities, where we place our attention, and that intentionality as we do things is the magic, because you are magic. And so your intention and your energy, the energy that's coming through that intention, is magical. It's very magical as it flows through you. So if you can create some kind of sacred space for yourself, some kind of altar, something that could be your routine, that daily thing of where you come to, and place something, like even whenever I'm traveling and whenever I'm hopping around, I have specific pieces like my tarot cards, certain crystals that are very sacred to me, that I've formed these very intentional relationships with, that help me with my well-being, mind, body, and soul. And so these are very sacred to me things, and I can create an altar out of them wherever I am. It doesn't necessarily have to be one specific place, but maybe even an altar could be like your favorite spot in nature. And do you go there? How often do you go there? That doesn't necessarily have to be the daily routine. Maybe that's like a once a week thing. But where is that sacred place where you can go to be tracking this season as you go through the phases, as you go through the cycling of this transformation, and are watching all of these variables and all of these pieces change about in your life, because especially stepping into the unknown, whenever something is unknown outside of you, that's whenever we can get really scared. But if you can take something like a known, like, oh, I love this peaceful spot by the creek and I can go there and ground myself and anchor myself. It's a sacred space. It makes me feel connected. It makes me feel present. It makes me take those deep breaths and not be so scared of the unknown. Then as things happen in your life, things that were not known, things that were the unknown become known, you're just going back to that spot over and over, and you're able to see, wow, the last time I was here, I didn't know XYZ, these different things that have happened. And wow, in the last week since I've been here, look at what has transpired. Look at what has shown up that I now know that I used to not know. And it can help you in trusting stepping into the unknown, in trusting, again, this process of changing realities that can be really uncomfortable because you don't know where you're going. But you recognize that you're creating that, and that there can be beauty and synchronicity. And as much as it feels like you're free falling, and I think back to that time after I just found out and was like just beginning on this huge transformation. I had this feeling at all times that was like, whenever you're walking down steps and you don't realize there's another step, but there is, and you get that like in your gut. That's how I felt all the time. And that's what I mean by I know how uncomfortable a transformation can be. And that's why I think these things can be so grounding and so helpful for being able to say, like, you have that lurch in your stomach. I don't know if that's how you say it, whatever. You've got that like lurching feeling, and it can feel so insufferable at the time. But then as time passes and you watch these cycles do their cycling, it becomes more tolerable, and you learn to move with it, and you've said goodbye to that old self who found those things so uncomfortable and are stepping into this new version of you who can handle these challenges, who can, like, for example, for me, like, have their beliefs questioned and be able to know who they trust and what they trust in and what they believe in. And you, or for me, I was crafting all of that, and that's how I found that security. And it was cycle by cycle, layer by layer. And that actually brings me to the next tip, which is journaling. This has been such a huge part of my life. I have so many journals, boxes of journals. And one of the most brilliant things about journaling, okay, a couple of them. I will get into a couple of them, but the first one that comes to my mind that's like, I think is so amazing is what I was saying about being able to track the cycles and being able to see that, wow, 2 weeks ago, I was so confused and afraid about XYZ. And now I'm already on the other side of that. And we can take those things really for granted. We just move along and then are worried about the next thing. But the more you can look back and go, oh, wow, I was really worried about XYZ. And then this, and this happened, and now I am relieved of that worry. Or maybe it was I was worried about XYZ, and then such and such did happen, and it was not so good, but I watched myself handle it really well. I watched myself handle it better than I would have in the past. And so you see, as you look back over these entries, the beauty of what's unfolding, and this transformation as it unfolds, it can be really, really awe-inspiring to look back at. But that's just if you look back at your journal entries, which can be really important, but you don't even have to do that to get the benefit of journaling. So another amazing thing about journaling is processing your feelings, processing your thoughts. You're going to have realizations as you're writing things out. Even if you just wrote every day, I feel, and then just wrote what you feel. Again, if you look back, you'll be able to see, wow, I felt this way this day, this way, this, and you'll see how it's changing and how you're evolving and how you're growing and how this transformation is transpiring. I especially love to look back at my journals on new moons and full moons, and I actually have a journal that's for just the moon phases as well, for the new moon and the full moon, and I'll have a link for that. It's that journal I made out of my own practice, but again, I use other just like plain line journals too for the days in between, but then that journal is specifically for new moons and full moons. And that really also just so that's twice a month that you would be checking in with yourself. But if you do that twice a month over a year, and you can look back through, wow, that's how I felt. And then 2 weeks later, I was dealing with that. And then 2 weeks later, look at how that evolved. And 2 weeks later, look at what happened next. It is truly magical and will make you feel so empowered in your magic and in your ability to do the dance of changing realities. And the fifth tip is to observe your relationships. Because, like I said, with saying goodbye to your old self, you might be saying goodbye to some people in your life too. And once again, we got to step into acceptance and recognize that this is happening for our greater good, or not just that something else is causing it to happen for our greater good, but that our choices and what our choices create is something that is for our greater good, and that we're using this, we're doing alchemy, that we're taking whatever shit has happened in our life and turning it into gold by using it as a catalyst to make these choices that bring about more creativity, bring about more well-being, bring about more oneness, peace, and joy. And there's a quote by Alfred Adler, or like the whole thing in Adlerian psychology is that all problems are interpersonal relationship problems. So you can't talk about transformation like it's happening in a vacuum. And I think back to me with my religious transformation, I definitely had to say goodbye to a lot of people. And that was one of the things that was so uncomfortable that caused me to have that knot in my stomach so much of the time, was because I was realizing, what do I have in common with these people who I've spent my whole life with? Will they accept who I want to become? I don't even know who I want to become yet, but will they accept that version of me whenever they have these beliefs that they're so dogmatic about? I know how they talk about people who change. I've seen that. Now I'm going to be changing. I'm transforming. Will they accept me? Will they not accept me? And ultimately, I had to let go of all of that. So it's not just saying goodbye to your old self. It's also saying goodbye to certain environmental and relational factors in that old life. And so, especially through something like journaling, you can observe those relationships and see how the patterns are changing. You can see how you're showing up differently. Back to the Adlerian psychology thing, we're facing problems a lot. Just the word problem is very general and broad. But if you think of, like it said, that all problems are interpersonal relationship problems, then especially going through a transformative time, there's usually problems that we're dealing with. So what does that say? It's relationship related, and this stuff is relating back to our relationships. And I think, especially for myself, it was a lot of caring what other people would think, and not even just the people who I knew would religiously no longer align with me, but it was also the people who I knew people would go, hey, but weren't you the like girl trying to convert people to Christianity? And now you're like, so, and so there's like other layers to it too, where I was like, I had to allow myself to change, right? That old self to die, but then also accept that other people can think what they want about that. And that's not my business. That's their job. My job is to be true to me and to allow this transformation to unfold as I want it to, as I create it to be, while dancing with the factors and the elements that are part of just my lived experience that make my transformation unique to me. And that handling of what only I can control and not trying to control what only other people control brings me to my sixth tip, which is to move your body and get connected to your body and listen to your inner voice. I would not say I had any connection to my body or my inner voice before that transformation that I've been sharing about. And yet I was still dancing all the time at that point. Isn't that interesting? I think people can talk about how dance is therapy, and it's like, okay, well, I know dancers who have taken their lives. Like, it's not just like a cure all, like, oh, you start dancing and now you're well. But I think that it can be like any of these things that I'm sharing, a pathway to that sovereignty over yourself and the choices that you need to make in order to be well. And again, I say again because actually the last episode was about collective liberation, and there's definitely systemic things to acknowledge within wellness. And so I don't just mean like bubble baths and Pilates when I'm talking about being well. I really do mean wellness from a state of like everyone is fed and safe, kind of way beyond just personal wellness. But I can't control that. All I can control is myself and then what I share with people. And so that's what the control I'm taking over myself. And but again, this for this tip, it's the what can you do within moving your body and connecting to your inner voice and your intuition. And I find that through moving my body really intuitively. So that's part of this tip is like connecting with your body in a way that's really intuitive. And by doing that, you're connecting with your intuition as well and your inner voice. And one of my favorite questions for connecting with the intuition is asking, does this make me feel big, like love makes me feel, or does this make me feel small, like fear makes me feel? And so you feel that in your body. Does this make me feel expansive, or does it make me feel small and constrained? And that can be one way to just start tuning in with your body. But I think even moving intuitively can be, I'm thinking for myself, one of the most beneficial things that I did during this transformation time was get into yoga. And while I think it would be very beneficial to go to yoga classes and learn yoga as well, something, and I don't even know if you would call it yoga then, but I would be on a yoga mat and just have on, like, say an artist I liked who had some chill music, just released a new album. I would be, and the album's like 45 minutes long. I'm like, okay, there's my yoga practice. I'll listen from this first song through the whole album. And when the album's done, or when I hear that intro song again, I'll wrap up my practice and I would just sit on my mat and do whatever felt good. Maybe I would sit in a forward fold for 10 minutes. Maybe I would do a bunch of sun salutations. If I had a lot of energy, I would just listen. I would just sit on a mat and have like the music playing so I could kind of be vibing with, because again, I love to dance. And so I'd be kind of vibing with it, but ultimately just listening to my body. Like right now, if I listen into my body, I'm like, oh yeah, I would love to roll my shoulders back and drop them down my back a little bit. Oh yeah, oh, head left to right. Sure, why not? That feels good. And that's just me going, what would feel good right now? And then doing that thing. And shocking, you can sit, you don't even you need a yoga mat. You just need a couple square feet on the floor. And you could sit there and go, what feels good? And connect. You don't even need to play music. You could just have a timer going for 30 minutes. I'm going to just connect with my body for 30 minutes, see what it has to say. And it's not just about how I would feel in my body after those times. It was really me creating like an atlas for listening to myself, creating a map of my inner world and of my body, and what would happen whenever different things were happening in my life, what would happen in my body. Because say I came to that practice feeling really anxious, where would I be feeling that? What movement would I end up doing? Say I came to that practice really like spazzy, feeling like very ungrounded. What would I do in that case? If I came to it really sad, really grieving something, what did my body want to do from that place? And so I was connecting with my body, creating, like I said, this map of my own emotional, physical, physiological relationship. But I was also connecting to just hearing from myself, because whenever you're in certain, say if I was in a pigeon pose or something for a while, often I think of pigeon because that was one that what would often happen is I would start to feel some really big feelings whenever I'm in that pose. And then after I finish it, I would suddenly have an idea for something that I wanted to create. And all these things would happen whenever I was in this space by just taking the time to connect to my body and what it wanted to say and how it wanted to move, and the kind of ideas and epiphanies that I would have from doing those movements that my body was calling for me to make. And my love, the last tip is forgive. Forgive yourself first and foremost. And you can even think as you're forgiving yourself that it creates this, like if this visual helps you, when you're forgiving yourself, create this field around you. You can pick any color. I like to pick like a warm pink, and you see this warm pink energy around you, like an egg or something that you're in. And I get to that place of where I feel forgiveness for myself. And so like the feeling cultivates the color that I'm visualizing, it cultivates how I'm feeling in my body. And I feel that forgiveness. And then I extend that outwards. And it's not necessarily to give that, but it's more like as that egg expands, it's pushing out anything else that's coming in. And I create this sovereign energy bubble around myself of love and forgiveness, because again, this is all I can control right here. And then as you extend that out, it just creates the space between you and these things that might not be feeling just right. And I mean, I went through it was this transformation took many years and had many phases to it. And I think of especially like forgiving my dad, that didn't happen overnight. And that also doesn't mean forgiveness beyond just yourself doesn't mean that you necessarily have to accept certain behaviors or tolerate certain things. That's not what I mean by forgiveness, that the person doesn't have to come back into your life, but you are no longer within your egg of forgiving energy. You're no longer holding on to any anger or any resentment. And that is a gift that you can give yourself. I think this goes back to number one, too, because in part of saying goodbye to that old self is forgiving the things that you're letting go of, acknowledging that there wasn't necessarily anything wrong with you, but maybe there were certain, like for me, belief systems that were maladaptive and based on false premises that I forgive myself for being that version of me, but I also let it go. And that is the final tip for this dance of changing realities. That is transformation. Going through transformation, I think that the frequency of transformation and creativity are very similar because this is a creative energy that we're in. It's alchemy. And I've got other episodes on alchemy and my alchemical creative process that would probably be good if you're really vibing on this, because I think transformation is alchemical. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. I wish you all the best in your transformation. I absolutely believe in you and whatever vision it has, whatever vision that it is that you have for who you want to become and where you want to go. And if you don't have that vision yet, that's fine too. I love you just as much. Bye, and I'll see you in the next episode.